How quickly can Scott Frost make UCF a Big 12 contender?
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12, Locked On UCF crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. And that is Mike Gittins of Locked On UCF. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. Let's talk BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, but how UCF can separate themselves from that pack of the newer, not newest, guys in the Big 12, thanks to Scott Frost. We'll also in the middle segment say, hey, Scott Frost, a champion in the Big 12, what is that timeline and can it actually happen? And then at the very end, let's play devil's advocate. If it does go wrong, what went wrong overall in Orlando, as it is now a frost warning all over again in Central Florida? If you hit subscribe, we both get to keep our jobs, which would be great this holiday season. Mike, to start it off, look, to me, the first metric of success for Scott Frost is separating himself from BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, the teams that UCF should compare itself to. Can he do that? Can UCF become the best newer guy in the Big 12, even in year number one under Frost, when especially you're going against a BYU team that's so prominent?
Yeah, I think that it comes down to two things, Drake. It comes down to recruiting, and it comes down to game planning and play calling.
Yep.
These were things that were issues under Gus Malzahn, especially the play calling part and the game planning part. When Gus took the UCF job, well, a lot of UCF fans saw a coach who had a safe 8-win floor in the SEC. They figured that would translate to UCF. And as the years went on, that floor effectively lowered until you got to what you got this season. And so does Frost raise the floor for UCF to, 7 wins is a bad year, right? Yeah. I think he does. You got somebody who understands the landscape down there. Now, this is a different era, and this is something that I think doesn't get talked about enough. A lot of these guys who have been out of coaching before NIL and now in the NIL era is different. It is a different beast with how expectations have raised quickly, Drake. You have to win faster in the NIL and with these new portal rules that are in place where you can go out and you can get guys in the portal that can come in and transfer your program. You can flip a roster faster than you ever could before in the past. Yeah. Can Scott Frost flip the roster better than the guys at BYU and Cincy and Houston? I think he has that capability. That's why you rehire Scott Frost. He understands your program. He understands the culture that you need, what kids are looking for to come to Orlando to play football. And I think if you give him the financial support, UCF is in the process of reorganizing their collective in anticipation of the laws around it changing and the school being able to own a lot more of that process. If UCF can own the NIL process completely, and you can tell Scott Frost, here's the checkbook, go out and get your guys. I do think that he competes with those guys in year one.
Orlando, you're looking at a recruiting base in Florida where you're teed up. It's tough to find something much better than the bounce house, than a university that boasts 60,000 students from online to on campus and a prominent brand, one that has a claimed national championship in 2017. And whether you agree or disagree with it, it means that they were very good at football for an extended period of time. With all of those things considered, is UCF the best destination job in a vacuum of those four?
Yeah, I think so. Look, kids want to go play down south, man. Come on, let's be real. Nobody really wants to go play in cold weather climates. I think schools, like Oregon and that have had success at football have always had this challenge in that, when these kids go visit other schools like Miami or UCF or any of these like southern schools where the weather is much better, they like it. They want to go play there, and there's a lot to do in Orlando. And now we're giving kids a lot of money, Drake, to go be the biggest jerks they can be. So you can be a star and you can be a big jerk with a bunch of money in college now. And I think it's going to be interesting to see. But yes, it is a great destination job. And what doesn't get talked about enough is UCF has a really young and enthusiastic fan base. And in my time covering the school, man, they have a lot of enthusiasm, and they did not check out on this team at all, despite all the troubles in the win-loss column. They hung in there to the end. They voiced their displeasure with how it was going. And at the end of the day, they're helping to raise the expectations that, look, we don't want to be that school that just barely makes a bowl game every year. You can win here. And why you rehire Scott Frost, because he was on the verge of taking you to that next level in 2017. He just hired his former QB from that undefeated 13-0 season where they absolutely mollywopped Auburn in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, and Mackenzie Milton coming back to be his QB coach. So you're hiring guys who understand how you want things done. I think this is a match made in heaven, and I think this hire makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Mike, I want to affirm one of those takes you gave right there. This is a young fan base that is getting older, as we all do, right? But in saying that, if you're 75 years old, you could never say, oh, I watched UCF when I was a kid, or I have this great memory of being a UCF fan. You can say that about BYU or Houston or Cincinnati, but UCF started football in 1979. Those guys were 35 years old if you're sitting at 80 right now or 75 right now. And so for a UCF fan base that is so active, a lot of young donors that as they get older and accrue more money, UCF gets even more powerful. You know, you look at every other fan base, they've spent decades and decades having those old, rich donors pouring money in. UCF is only now getting that kind of love from a large portion of alumni. Mike, when you do take into account BYU, Cincinnati, and Houston, BYU being kind of the bell cow right there of what we've seen in football product the last 2 years from that group, is there a way via the transfer portal that UCF has this Arizona State-esque turnaround and even surpasses the Cougars?
Yeah, it comes down to talent evaluation. And this is an underrated part of, I think, coaching. And the better coaches, they don't miss when they evaluate a guy. When they go out and they get a guy, they hit more often than they miss. And your question is, can Scott Frost do that? Can he be better at talent evaluation than his peers? BYU, to me, is the standard that everybody's aiming for in terms of fan support, in terms of NIL in the Big 12. They're what you're trying to do here. But to raise money, it's like a campaign, man. You got to win. You have to win, and you need to put W's on the board. You need to show that you can be a good steward over what you have. And they'll say, hey, we see the potential is clearly there. Let's put more money behind this coach. And those young people who you're talking about who are getting older by the year, Drake, will spend their hard-earned money to support a winner. But nobody wants to put financial support in this economy behind a loser. So I don't know if you've seen gas prices lately, but
they're not great.
We need a winner.
They're not great. Coming up, we've talked a lot about potential and being where that standard is set. Why is Scott Frost the right guy to do that? Let's talk Frost himself. That is next on a Locked On Big 12, Locked On UCF crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of a college football or NFL game, say it's 7-7 at halftime and your team has the momentum, you think they're going to win it, but you go to FanDuel and the live bet says, wait a second, we're plus 120, meaning if I put $100 on it and we do win, I get $120. That's what FanDuel is there for. It's just that easy on the FanDuel app. And right now, you bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Place live bets on the NFL and college football all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place those bets. FanDuel.com to join today or download the FanDuel app. Download the FanDuel app, $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel. It is an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Mike Gittins of Locked On UCF, Scott Frost. If I just put it plainly as, why is he the guy? Why is he the right hire? What makes you so confident in that name, Frost?
Yeah, I think it's the previous success. It's what you know about Scott Frost and what he was able to accomplish there. Again, 13-0, undefeated seasons in college football do not come easy. They're not. It's very hard to win every single game. We saw a UCF team in 2017 that would have made a 12-team college football playoff easily. As a matter of fact, they might have earned one of those coveted buys in the format that we're in currently. And so you're hoping that if you put enough dollars behind him, and then again, I can't reiterate enough, with the portal, you can flip a roster much faster than you could before in the past. Can he use the portal and whatever NIL dollars are available to him to flip that? I think that makes him the right guy for this job. There's enough ground support there for Scott Frost to go on a campaign, man, and explain to these kids. He's a young coach. He's a young coach as well, too. And I think that kids connect with a lot of this younger generation of coaches that understand a lot more what these guys are going through as players. And on the recruiting trail, we hear from athletes time and time again. In my many interviews with athletes, they talk about, hey, man, does this guy get it, man? Does he get where I'm coming from? Can he relate? Can we relate? Does he feel like somebody who understands where I come from and what my struggle is and why this is so important to me, right? And then the last part of it is in talking to people who have had contact with Scott Frost. I'm going to get to know this coach over his time at UCF, but I talked to people who have dealt with Scott Frost, and the overwhelming consensus is that he's somebody who can connect with kids. He knows how to do that. And that's going to pay dividends for him, I think, because if the dollars are the same, because everybody talks about, oh, you got to have money. Like, look, man, if you're a top 50 overall kid, the dollars are pretty much the same almost everywhere you're going to go. People understand where the market is at. So it still comes down to coaching and development. And do I believe what this guy is telling me, right? Do I believe when he tells me his vision for what my talent could be at UCF, do I believe him? Because coaches are out here lying to kids, man, to get them there. And now the kid has more power than they've ever had. If you lie to me, I'm out. You can't handcuff me to school anymore. I can get in that first portal period and I can say, hey, look, you either keep your promises or I'm out. From what I understand, Scott Frost is a guy who keeps his promises or at least tries to. And it's going to resonate. And I think that makes him a great, great hire for UCF.
Mike, I want to talk later on about how the Nebraska tenure for Frost could be seen as a downside, but I want to take time now to talk about how we can put it behind us and not worry about his time in Lincoln. What do we do to soften the blow of such a bad 5-year stretch for him at Nebraska?
Well, redemption stories are very common in college football. Your Lane Kiffins, your Steve Sarkisians, these guys who resurrected from a lot of off-field issues. And look, man, there were a lot of stories about the end of Scott Frost's tenure. It involved alcohol and women and all kinds of craziness. And look, I think America loves a comeback story. We love a comeback story, and we love a good redemption story. So has he learned from those things? Again, in talking to people close to Scott Frost, there's been a lot of reflection that's happened over the last 2 years, and he feels like he's got that part of his life together, and this is a good time for him to jump back into coaching, right? And so I think the message here is redemption, right? He who among us who is without sin cast the first stone. Like, look, there's no perfect person out there. Frost has made his mistakes, and his legacy will be about what he does moving forward. Yep. Right. So, you've got an athletic director who's decided to take a chance, and that's part of it. Right. A lot of these coaching contracts have behavior clauses and morality clauses in them. And if you don't do the right things, they can terminate you with cause and not pay you a dime on the way out. Well, look, you have conversations on the front end to make sure that's not going to be a problem. You got to put it in there, but I don't think it's going to be a problem with Scott Frost. I think that sometimes going through that stuff, Drake, is what you need to be able to straighten things out and get on the right path, right? So it's about redemption to me, and I think he's going to find it at UCF.
Mike, Bill Belichick was just hired at the University of North Carolina. Instant impact, right? Wild. He's got this 400-page manifesto, and day one, you can already feel the reverberation across college football, and especially in Chapel Hill of him being hired. What was the day one, not just reaction, but overall wave that comes through UCF when Scott Frost comes in, and how much confidence does it give you that his press conference to that first announcement bodes well for him winning immediately?
Look, I think he won today at the press conference, and I think he said what he had to say. But ultimately, he understands that you can say anything from a podium. Words can ring hollow. It's going to be about actions moving forward. But I thought that he handled the opening presser and explain. He tried to level set Drake. He tried to explain to fans, look, you're not going to we don't expect championships in year one. We've got to build this thing, and I need time to do that. So setting the expectations is what he aimed to do. I thought he did a good job of conveying that message. But ultimately, no matter what he says, he understands that the clock is ticking from day one, and he's got to show marked and clear progress from year one. So even if it doesn't show up big in the wins and losses column, you're still statistically showing that you're moving the thing the right direction, or recruits are committing, or you got something to hang your hat on. And Scott Frost understands that. I think recruiting is going to be the big one. If you can land a top 25 recruiting class in year one, you're going to be showing great progress there. And if you can't do that, then you got to get in the portal and you've got to get that big name. And then you've got to show out in year one and show proof of concept, Drake. So he talked about all those things in his opener, and like, look, I think he's got a good blueprint for how to do this, and that gives people a lot of confidence.
Yeah. Mike, I want to get into next the devil's advocate side. What could go wrong by bringing in Scott Frost to UCF, especially looking at the tenure at Nebraska? You got to play both sides, and then we'll eventually talk about how, in closing, you believe it will go over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, right here on Locked On Big 12 and Locked On UCF, a crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Omaha. Today's show is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. I cannot find a single good steak in the city of Savannah, Georgia, so I've gone to Omaha Steaks to cook my own. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite. Right now, you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off. That's right, 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. 5 generations of experience. They consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites, legendary steaks, mouth-watering desserts. 50%. Save that site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. 50%. OMAHA steaks.com. Extra $30 off, promo code COLLEGE. Yep, minimum purchase may apply. Visit Omaha Steaks and do it today. Mike G with Locked On UCF. Everybody hit subscribe on both Locked On Big 12 and Locked On UCF. Stay up to date with all things across the Big 12 with the Knights. If things do go wrong for Scott Frost, which is certainly a possibility, we've already said this should work out. Everything points to this being the correct hire for UCF. But if the ship completely sinks, what did go wrong for Frost in Orlando?
Yeah, I think, again, it's going to be about the on-the-field product. If this ship sinks, it's going to be about him consistently losing on the field to his rivals. And, look, nobody expects a year one miracle, even though sometimes they happen in college football. Yeah. But that's the problem. Like, I hate to stop you there, but we look at Sonny Dykes at TCU, or even the year 2 miracle that Dillingham's put together at Arizona State, or year 2 in the Big 12 for BYU. Everybody wants to be that program that in year 1, year 2 is winning. And that's set a very bad precedent for UCF, because now the clock is already ticking. Yeah. And then when you look at those, what we call toss-up games, right? When you look at those toss-up games, is he winning more of those than he's losing? Okay. When it comes down to crunch time, is UCF making the right play? Are players making plays? Are the right calls being made from a coaching standpoint, or are they fumbling the bag in crunch time? It felt like this year, every time UCF had an opportunity, look at that Arizona State game. That was a game they should have won, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, Scatterboo was out, right? Like that thing was prime for UCF to take, but they could not find plays in a lot of close games. And this is why we talked about this with my guy, Andrew Glucko from the Last Word on Sports over on Locked On UCF. We talked about, okay, what are year one expectations? He says that the floor should be 6-6. I said, with the talent that they should be able to get there, I think the floor should be 7-5. And hiring a coach like Scott Frost should raise your floor about 1 to 2 wins. I think that's a reasonable expectation to say, hey, we want you to finish just above 500 every year. There were fans in our mention saying, that's crazy. The floor is 4. There's no way the floor should be 4. With the talent that they have, right? So I said this on Twitter. Again, follow me at Mike Gittins on Twitter. The difference between an 8-4 team, Drake, and a 10-2 team is probably talent, right? The guys who recruited just a little better than you did, and they had, that one playmaker that you didn't have. I cover Auburn as well too. Cam Coleman, top 5 overall player in high school, he decommitted from Texas A&M, right? And then he committed to Auburn. And then when Texas A&M played Auburn, Cam Coleman torched them for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns as a true freshman. If you're getting those kids, they can be the difference. But the difference between 5-7 and 8-4 is coaching.
Yep.
There are not a ton of teams in college football that don't have enough talent to win 6 games.
Yeah.
If you're not winning 6, it's because you're failing as a coach. And that's what I think the Scott Frost effect, call it the Frost warning, frostbite, whatever moniker we would attach to that, should be good for 7-5, at worst 6-6 every year. And then the progress should be there so that when they do get that one piece, that one transformational player, you're over the hump, man. And in a 12-team playoff era, there's a much wider margin for error than there has ever been. UCF should be able to make a 12-team playoff more years than not. The back end of that playoff, come on, Drake. 12 teams. Do it.
Yeah, it's with the recruiting base in Florida, you're there, right? You've got to be. It's a different standard in Morgantown, West Virginia, given you don't have the hotbed locally. There aren't kids within 30 minutes of you who could win at the Power 5 level. But in Orlando, you have to. It's a gift that you are given as the head coach at UCF. Mike, what did Gus Malzahn do in his last couple of years at UCF that Scott Frost must avoid to not only keep a bad taste in Knights' mouths, but also to completely make the program his own?
It's quarterback development.
Okay.
And it plagued Gus his entire career.
Yeah.
But you could see when Gus was able to find that transformational quarterback, it was championship run time.
Yeah.
And you got to stop pretending that you can have game managers back there in some of these systems, right? In Gus's system, you needed a dude. You needed a Cam Newton, which we saw how that looked in 2010. You needed a Nick Marshall. You needed a Jarrett Stidham, right? Yeah. When he got those guys, he was on fire. If you're Scott Frost, you can't do what Gus did. You can't bring in KJ Jefferson and then bench him before midseason.
Yeah.
Wild. No way. There's no way. And the money that they had to shell out for an SEC starting quarterback to come into UCF and then not win games. And then you go to Jacurri Brown and EJ Colson. Colson clearly doesn't look ready. Jacurri Brown is a dynamic runner, but again, at the end of BYU, he was just throwing interceptions. Now you're on your 4th quarterback. And I commend Gus for having the balls to go to Dylan Rizk. Great last name.
Who played pretty well, by the way.
Yes.
He played pretty good.
I thought he did enough to earn an opportunity at the end of that BYU game. He led a touchdown drive when they could not. And they went to him. And look, man, moving forward, he was big versus Arizona. I think he had a 300-yard game and 3 touchdowns. But ultimately, just too much dysfunction there. In today's college football, if you don't have dynamic quarterback play, you have to be perfect everywhere else to compete for championships. And the only examples that I think we've seen of that in the last few years has probably been 2021 Georgia.
Yeah.
With the first iteration of Stetson Bennett and last year's Michigan.
Yep.
Right? Where quarterback play, where you had somewhat of a game manager back there, but everything else was good enough for you to win a championship, meaning you had a championship level defense and you had a great run game and wide receivers can go up and make a play for
McCarron, McElroy. Bama did this for a long time under Saban. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, but when Nick Saban hired Lane Kiffin, he understood the shift that was happening in college football. He said, I got to catch up with tempo. 3 yards in a cloud of dust football isn't going to work anymore. And then Bama became quarterback man.
Yep.
I think at one point, last year they had 4 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Last year, a year before, between Bryce Young and our guy.
Mac Jones and Tua, and
Mac
the list
Jones,
goes on.
Tua. Yeah,
Jalen Hurts. You can include Hurts in that if you want to. Yeah,
NFL MVP, man. Yep. But that's not what they were before in the first few championships that they won. Today's college football demands dynamic quarterback play, and if you don't have it, and if I would go as far to say, some people may think this is a hot take. If you don't have 2 guys that can do the job, you're playing with fire. because most of these teams are one injury away from their entire season tanking.
Utah.
Right? Yeah. If you don't have a guy behind, and Utah was picked to win the Big 12, and they finished dead last. Come on, man. You got to have two guys that can do it. And I think that if you're Scott Frost, that you hire Mackenzie Milton because you hire a guy who knows what it's like to win every football game he played in the season. And you got to get this right, because that's Gus. That's where I think Gus, it was over for Gus when KJ Jefferson didn't work out.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have a guy on the roster that could come in and save a season. And I think it's a terrible place to be as a coach when you need a quarterback to save you. And they can't have that under Frost. You got to have a solid D, and you've got to get playmakers around your quarterback. Go out and find those guys in the portal if you can't get them from high school, and make sure that you have a cushion for your backup. If your dynamic starter gets hurt or just isn't playing well, you've got to, if you don't have it, you're playing with fire here, Drake.
Yeah. Mike, before we get you out of here, where can folks find more of your work, more of your coverage of UCF and overall in college football?
Check us out over on LockedOn UCF. We are on fire, Drake, but we need your help to get to 1,000 subscribers. I think we're just under 600 right now. We've been at it less than 2 months, but we're pumping out some great content for you guys over at LockedOn UCF. So follow me at Mike Gittins on Twitter for a lot of great LockedOn UCF content. And when you see us, drop a comment, drop a like, drop everything, and watch LockedOn UCF.
We'll be covering UCF and the rest of the teams, the Big 12, the rest of this week and all off season as well at Locked On Big 12 and Locked On UCF. Thanks for watching or listening today. This has been and always will be Locked On UCF and Dose Grande.